Do you guys hear that?
Yes.
Yeah, it's like a light rustle kind of thing.
Ah,
Yeah.
I think it's the. You hear that?
I think it's the vent.
yeah.
I think it's the.
I can hear the vent.
I think it's. I feel like it's the old trout rods coming out of people's closets because the winter has passed and the spring is here. It's trout opener weekend.
Trout
because-
opener
yeah,
weekend.
April 23rd.
And
Last
people go for
Saturday in
steelhead.
April, last
What a
Saturday in
shame.
April, yeah.
Every year, last Saturday in April.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And so today we're not on the river, but we're recording to celebrate the opener of trout, and we're interviewing a legend of the fly fishing world in Southern Ontario. He's been fishing these rivers for how many years?
Well, these rivers around here, I've been fly fishing for close to 40 years.
Well, there you go, 40 years building bamboo rods.
Yep.
Which
tying
I
all
can see
kinds of-
one right there.
Yep.
Yeah, tying flies, doing all kinds of things for 40 years. And we're here interviewing him today, which is actually a pretty fitting way to kick off Trout Opener. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank
Welcome
you.
to So
Some
Fly.
look to it.
Thank you.
Of course, I'm joined again by Yelma and Gab. Yelma, how's it going?
Good.
Gab, how are you?
Hey, how you doing, guys?
And so today we're obviously going to be talking about trout, but I'm sure we're going to go in tons of different directions because we're interviewing, Joe, who's been, like I said, fishing for 40 years. And when did you start fly fishing?
Well,
How did you get into it?
well, probably when I was 12 or 13, I got my first fly rod.
Okay.
And had no idea what I was doing, of course, but it was good. It was fun. Some of the early experiences I had, which really started to open my mind, was with carp.
Oh, really?
Yes. I love to hear
And
that.
yeah, because they were accessible, and I would stock them like bonefish, and and it was easy to observe. Right, you could see them sort of mudding around on the bottom. You would cast the fly, and then you could see them react to the fly, and those early experiences sort of taught you stealth, which is very important in fly fishing. Taught you observation, which I think is the cornerstone of great fly fishing. And it sort of, helped, create that fire in you to sort of understand what the sport of fly fishing truly is, right?
So you saw these carp inside a river.
Yeah,
you said.
yeah, off to the side, yeah.
Right, and you said that'd be cool to.
Yeah, and of course, as a young man, the thing that you pursued was, you start reading books on fly fishing, and you understand that the pinnacle of successful fly fishing is dry fly fishing. I mean, to the exclusion that it was frowned upon at the time. Nymph fishing and wet fly fishing was almost something that the unwashed masses did. But it was very hard to be successful with a dry fly, because a lot of the rivers and streams that we had at that time were not classic. They had a lot of coarse fish in them, chub, that kind of thing, and they are not that selective. You could tie a cigarette butt on and float it down.
So you were born with a fly rod in your hand,
Well,
and then you hit the river, and that was that. Then.
yeah.
Or did you start spin fishing?
Of course. Before then, I started with a worm, like most people did,
Yeah.
and you catch chub, and you have some success with trout for sure.
Yeah.
But there's the aesthetic of worm fishing or bait fishing at the time lacked something. There was something in you that you liked the way fly rods looked. You liked the concept of it all. There was just an overall aesthetic that attracted you to them.
Yeah.
I love how you started with the carp, because usually people start fly fishing, they think about trout. You started with the carp, and now, like the last 5 years or so, carp has like regained in
Sure it
popularity.
does.
And you know what, too, though? That's
lot of-
funny because we've talked a lot about like fish that we've started fly fishing on.
Yeah.
And like for me, it was bass.
Yes.
Bass is a big fish for spin fishing guys too.
Sure it is.
But carp as an entry fish.
That must be so hard. Like to start fly fishing for carp, like to
Right.
focus on them.
Well, the good thing with carp was you didn't require to be a good caster, and carp looked down. They didn't look up. They looked at the bottom. So presentation wasn't as important. Drag and the style of flies, they were very forgiving that way. The only thing with carp was stealth. They are very, very, very spooky.
Really?
Oh yeah, incredibly spooky.
Yeah.
And you have to remember too, you're fishing shallow water. So if you understand the way fish relate, the closer the surface is to the fish, the bigger the window is. If a fish is in 10 feet of water, it has a very small window, and they're less spooky in that kind of water.
Right.
But if a fish is very near the surface, the window is very large, so it is easy to spook them. That is why people on the credit, for example, have no success, because if a fish is feeding on a dry fly and it's near the surface, its window is huge.
Yeah.
So it sees you coming
As soon
a
as
mile
you put
away.
the foot in the water, it's done.
Right. Oh, I want to correct something.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
made a mistake. It's actually the opposite. When a fish is deep, the window's big. When the fish is right near the surface, the window's at its smallest.
Right.
So they are vulnerable when if you understand that if they're right at the very surface, you can get pretty close to them and catch them.
Because logic, I would think, would be the.
It's the other way. It's the other way around. So as I've had fish rising steady, and I've had people yell at me and saying you're going to spook them, but I won't spook them if they're right near the surface. If they're 2 inches under the surface, their window's very small.
Right.
So you could get, and that's the point. You want to get as close as possible so you can eliminate drag. Guys that want to cast 40 feet to a rising trout, good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't eliminate all that drag.
And the hook set and everything else.
The best fly fish run I ever saw, especially when I went to central Pennsylvania, that was an eye-opener for me. They try and get as close to the fish as they can. They're trying to eliminate as much drag as they can.
So you fished down in central Pennsylvania on just one river?
Oh no, there are a number of rivers. There's the mighty Penns. Penns Creek is a huge, beautiful river. Spring Creek, which I think Paul Young fished Spring Creek. Vince Marinero fished Spring Creek. Mm-hmm. Spring Creek is a limestone. And the limestones of central Pennsylvania are
Very fertile.
they're the MIT of all rivers, in my opinion, more so than they are in upstate New York.
Yeah. The Catskills.
Yeah, because they're usually low gradient streams, most of them. Mm-hmm. So you have a lot of these long flat pools, which force you to be observant, and force you to be a good caster, to eliminate drag, and to have the right patterns. So, but I've jumped all over the place.
That's
here,
okay. No, I have to see Pennsylvania because upstate New York's got a special place in my heart. And I don't think there's any place better than upstate New York, so Pennsylvania must be crazy.
Well, it's my friends and I, the guys I grew up fly fishing with, we used to have this saying that, you go fish a hatch, and your success is, at the end of the day, we would always look at each other and say, all right, we're all going to have dunce hats on at the end of the day. The classic dunce hats. Some will be bigger than others. So we always
Come fish with me.
So when I went to central Pennsylvania the first time, and I came back to the car, I thought, I have an enormous dunce hat on. But we would always show up at the end of the day and compare notes, and we would always look to see who's got the biggest dunce hat, who's got the smallest dunce hat.
Yeah.
I just want to know a little bit more about, you picked up fly fishing, you were fishing carp, that sort of thing. Where did it take you? Like, were you fishing just southern Ontario, or where did you? Yeah,
it was more so that when I was a young man and I didn't have a car, I had a bike. It was more rivers that were accessible around Port Dover, Lake Erie. There's some streams that ran in there.
Yeah.
And the first trout I ever caught on a dry fly, you got to remember, I read all these books, the way trout are supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And I remember walking down to the stream and looking for carp and crappies and rock bass with my fly rod. And I had like 4 dry flies I had bought at a sporting store that were tied in England. And I came up upon this log one day on a bank, and I saw this 10-inch trout sitting below the surface, regularly rising and eating something off the surface. And I thought, that's exactly what the books have been telling me.
Yeah.
So I put on a fly, cast, and the fish went down. I scared the fish right off the bat, because I had no concept. I didn't stop.
Any dry fly.
I didn't stop. I didn't look. I didn't think.
Yeah.
So I thought, boy, I feel really dumb. So I sat on the bank. He started rising in 10 minutes again, and this time I thought, well, I'm going to look a little closer. So I noticed this bug. I really didn't pay that much attention to it, but I noticed it had 2 wings, and I noticed, what kind of rough bug it was. I looked for something close. I cast, and I got lucky, and it took the fly, and I thought, that's it. I am now an amazing angler.
Yeah.
Little did it take, not understand it would take me another year before I would catch another one.
Yeah.
Okay, so you realized, so you're reading the books and then you saw it actually happening in person, right? And we've all seen that too, because we've been on the river and it's like, oh, we have to be quiet, we have to stay low, use this fly, And then we end up throwing, Hendricksons in a trico hatch kind of thing, and we just scare all the fish away. We see them, like they're swimming by our
Or
feet.
Mitch getting mad at me because I'm throwing a streamer during a hatch.
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
what are you doing?
Well, so we just squeezed more information into the intro of the show than we have in the last 3 episodes, I think.
I think we're jumping all over the place.
We're jumping all over the place, but that's okay. So
That's
you go.
okay. We're no radio stations. We
Yeah,
do whatever
yeah.
we want.
What I'm thinking is, I show up to the trout stream, any trout stream.
Right.
Do I do the same thing? What is my process when I get there?
So that's a great example. Let's take. I'm going to leave the opener alone because the opener probably in most cases will probably be nymph fishing. There's the odd eddy or back eddy, or you'll get olives hatching. They're the first, the small blue-winged olive. You'll get them hatching, and the fish may or may not react to them. But the second weekend after opener is when I start to look for, which I think is the most important hatch at the beginning of the year, in a mayfly sense, is the Hendrickson. Now, in the sport, you can go as far as you want. You can just call it the Hendrickson, or you could go a little deeper and understand the Latin name for it, which is important to a certain extent, which is Femarella subvaria. Now, why is that? Because a Hendrickson here and a Hendrickson in Montana, let's say, they don't have Hendricksons, but let's say if they do, they can be different. A great example is the green drake. We have a green drake, they have one out west, but they're different bugs. And you have to go to the Latin name. So if you go to Femarella subvaria, which is the Hendrickson, the first big hatch of the year, what would I do? So I would go down to the river, as I was saying. I would go down at noon. Why would I go down at noon? Well, because they're looking for a certain temperature to emerge. And usually that is between 2 and 4. 2 and 4 in the afternoon is the sweet spot. So if I go down at noon, I take my time, I put my gear on, I get to the water, I turn over some rocks. And I look. Wow, look at all these Hendrickson nymphs that have migrated to the bank of the river. What does that tell me? That tells me that something's going to happen, right? The next thing I would do is I would look close at those nymphs. I met an entomologist from the ROM, the Royal Ontario Museum, and he told me that what he observed with the Hendrickson was as they get closer to hatching, like the day they're going to hatch, there's a little light band that you see in the nymph, and it's very pink. And the pinker it is, the closer it is to emerging, to the point where it actually emerges that morning, it's bright pink almost. So I know that I'm going to have a good hatch. If I got down there and I didn't see that many nymphs close to the bank yet, and I did look at them, they were still a bit dark, I would think, well, I may get some hatching, but I may not.
Yeah.
So I'm going to fish a nymph anyways, and I'll fish it, and there will be a couple come off. But I'm not going to have a big day. So let's say I get there and I've already I see a lot of nymphs. I tie on a nymph and I start to fish, the riffle toward the pool or into a pool because the fish are going to be in the pool. Mm-hmm. May get the odd one that's already starting to look and see them.
But the water's still cold at that
Still
time,
a bit
right?
cold, and you got to be, for a moment, think like a fish and look under the river. You have all these nymphs, and they're starting to move around, and in order for them to hatch, they're going to actually migrate to the side and then swim to the surface, split their shuck. The wings come out. Well, actually, a Hendrickson's a little unique that way. Float, dry their wings, and fly into the trees.
Yeah.
Okay? So if you know that, the fish know that, then you can start to sort of take advantage of that. So that's what I would start to do. As we get closer to the right temperature, air temperature and water temperature, the fish will migrate out of those pools and start moving into the heads of the pools or into the shallower water, positioning themselves in a particular place so that they can intercept. So on the Grand, for example, because the Grand
Like
gets
insects
Hendricksons,
floating down.
the most amazing thing you'll see, the Hendrickson hatch is coming at that time of day. The Canada geese with all their little babies, they'll actually move into a position and wait for the hatch to start because they'll sit there and pick Hendricksons as they're coming off.
That's insane.
I didn't know that.
I would never think
You'll
about
see
that.
it.
The geese would fish.
Absolutely.
With fish, feed
Absolutely.
on
They go
hatch.
crazy. And especially when you see the kind of dense hatches that some of these streams get, those big, long, flat pools, it is a blizzard of Hendricksons. So I'm there. I start to drift an nymph. Maybe I'll catch a small fish right off the bat or what have you. As we get closer to the warm time of day, then you'll start to see the odd one.
Because Mitch and I just get up at 4, and Gab, of course, get up at 4. So it doesn't matter how
But
early.
it was in September, so it's maybe
You
a little bit
need
different.
to prescribe to the concept of the most comfortable time of day theory.
Right.
In fly fishing, especially with mayflies, you have to understand that the most comfortable time of day theory means the most comfortable time of day for you to be out
Right.
is chances are when you're going to have some kind of insect activity. So let's think about that. So if Henderson in the spring, 2 to 4, that's usually the most comfortable time of day in the spring.
Yeah, the sun is
a bit
up,
warmer.
It's warm.
As the season progresses and it gets hotter during the day, the most comfortable time for us to be out is in the evening. It's cooler, the insects react the same way. So a
Holistic approach.
wise fly fisherman would understand the sort of temperature curve of the year.
Yeah.
And you see these guys all the time. They're never in a hurry to do anything.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
they're not. They take their time.
Oh, the
Because
guys
they-
that are fishing then? Yeah.
Yeah, they
They're
just
like-
know. They
yeah.
just know.
Oh, totally.
So Henderson's, I start to have these insects start to pop.
Yeah.
I start to look for rising fish. Now, where do I start to look for rising fish? Well, I look into the natural places where there's velocity changes in the river, a seam and a current, fast to slow. Fish will sit on that, and he'll sit in the slow water, and as a bug comes down, he'll go up and he'll get it and he'll go back down. So they're human calculators, if you will. They're always calculating the amount of energy they have to expend to take that in.
Yeah.
So, on a lot of these streams, you start to notice splash, 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 splash. Those to me are usually small fish because they're excited or what have you. Yeah, but you know what? You can start to fish. You can start to fish a dry fly or an emerger if you so happen to like that. But then you start to look to the places that are associated where there's larger fish, and you may see one rise.
And this is, this from just trial and error.
Yeah, I mean, you just
Fishing
do.
the rivers.
Right, you just do.
Yeah.
So what some fishermen do is they'll sit on a pool. They'll sit on the pool and they'll fish the whole hatch through that course of the day on that one pool. I am not like that. I like to move.
I'm a mover as well, which is cool.
I will sit early in the hatch, but when they start to hatch,
Yeah.
I do what I call a run. I start to go from pool to pool to pool to pool to pool to pool, all the way as fast as I can, cover as much water as I can,
Yeah.
and look for fish that are looking up. And you can have reasonable success at that point.
Yeah.
Now, what happens is that if you understand the Henderson, it is one of the type of mayflies that actually emerges before it hits the surface. So the sulfurs are the same way. So as the insect goes up, it splits its back and the wings come out. Most mayflies will go right to the top, split, and then their wings come out. The Henderson actually happens before. So what does that mean? It means that of all the mayflies, it has the highest incidence of stillborn.
Ah.
So what does that mean? It means insects that don't quite make it.
Yeah.
So they don't make it to the surface, so they're floating down. Easy meal for the fish.
Spinner, right?
Yeah.
No spinner.
Oh, that's
Spinner's
when they
when they're
die
dead.
and they
That's
come
right.
down.
So spinner, we'll get to the spinner. So
have to
so if you understand that, for me, it's getting closer at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
I switch to a fly, which I call a half and half. So it looks like half an nymph and half an adult. And I fish it wet under the surface, like a dry fly, but wet.
So there's 3. I thought so 3 stages. There's the nymph, there's the
Dun.
dun, and then the spinner.
That's
right?
correct.
Okay.
So the nymph is the subaquatic stage, or the aquatic stage. The dun is the freshly hatched adult. The spinner is the sexually mature portion. So what happens is that
The dry.
when the dun hatches, it goes to the trees, and its wings are opaque. It has a certain amount of water in it. It doesn't feed.
Yeah.
It consumes the amount of water it has, and that's it. When that water is gone, it reproduces and dies,
Right.
and returns to lay its eggs. So that's the spinner fall that Mitch was talking about. Again, it's a different thing. Most of the time, early in the hatch, 2 to 4, like I said, you'll just be fishing duns, and you'll be fishing the stillborns and the crap that's left afterwards.
Right.
Where I go after that, toward the end of that hatch, I'm still on duns,
Yeah.
is I go to eddies. I go to foam patches. That's a huge secret. I didn't want to give that away, but I'm giving it away. So I go to foam patches. Why do I do that? That's where all the unsuccessful insects...
They are all gathering at the same place.
So
Absolutely.
what is it's like the foam that you see in the water?
If you look closely, you will see
That
flies
foam-
that didn't make it stuck in the foam.
That foam is...
Some of the
packed with
biggest
different stuff.
fish, you'll go and you got to stare at the foam. You stare at the foam, you'll see the foam move. Like you'll see it, right? And if you could get your fly in there, chances are those are some of the biggest fish, and they're very smart because those bugs are all dead.
Yeah, so it's like this easy meal.
Easy, man.
And these fish are unseen from predators. 'cause they're
90%
under
of the
foam.
people, everybody's looking in the middle of the river
Yeah,
for
I
these
never
fish.
look at the phone.
The clean spot, the pristine.
And,
typical.
and if Vilma looks at the foam, I'll be really pissed off.
Yeah.
Because
We will.
I don't want anybody looking in the foam.
I'm going to look at the foam.
Leave the foam alone.
I'm only going to fish
Whatever,
foam
whatever you say,
from
Joe.
now on.
Next weekend, I will be doing it for the rest. of the summer.
I've been. It's funny. At the end of the hatch, in the course of the day, I've been standing on a bank with no fly line out, just my leader out, dipping my fly, and I've had guys come by and laugh at me and say,
Yeah.
"Look at the Lugan.
Yeah, you look like a maniac just sitting there tipping
Look at the
it.
Lugan." Some of the
Meanwhile.
biggest trout will feed in foam patches.
Yeah.
So that's it. The day's over. As you progress further into the season, maybe the third weekend or the fourth weekend, or you're now into May, then spinners, usually takes a few days, then spinners become important, right? So then you could fish the remnants of the dun emergence, which lasts a week or so. And then, around 4 o'clock, then you have a little bit of time to go back to the car, have a little bit of chicken, a little chablis.
Yeah.
Then you go back to the river. Then you find a pool. You don't run with spinners as much.
Okay.
Then you find a pool. You find a pool that holds big fish. You find the pools that work better are pools that are below a riffle where they're flatter.
Like just calm.
Because I'll tell you, a trout sipping spinners, very hard to see.
Yeah.
They know they're dead.
Yeah. So
They're not-
Yeah, they don't.
fighting
They
for
don't
it, right?
jump out of the water.
It's just
they
a
don't
car- it's
spend
just
that
a
much
little-
energy.
Blip, in the water.
Huge.
Do you find yourself changing your strategy because of the whole weather change, the whole climate change?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you do notice a difference.
Snowing last week.
More often, it's the overall
Right.
thing that you notice.
Timelines.
It affects the water quality.
Yeah.
It's a completely different thing now. So that's the Hendricksons.
Yeah. That's just one.
That's one.
Yeah.
The next hatch I'd be looking for would be the sulfurs, which are a smaller mayfly, but very important. A lot of people ignore them. And the gray fox.
Great fox, yeah.
A great bug too as well. It's a fairly big. And then the one after that, which I would say is the one that people leave their wives over, is the green drake, the eastern green
Yeah.
drake, which is Femerella gutulata. It's a burrower, which means that the nymph burrows into the silt.
Okay.
So it's not an important. You can't go fish a green drake nymph the opening day of trout season. It won't matter. The fish won't see. They won't know what it is.
Yeah.
They're in the mud.
They're in the mud.
They're not thinking about it. Yeah, that's true.
But it traditionally brings up the biggest fish of the year.
Really, eh? Bigger than... Is
How
it bigger
big
than...
are the green drake? So
Yeah, in relation to like because Hendricksons are big, right?
Hendrickson's 12 to 14s.
Yeah.
Green drakes start to get up into 10.
Oh, wow.
10, 12.
Oh, wow.
But you wouldn't tie it on a regular size 10 or 12 hook. You would tie it on a long shank 10 or 12.
Okay.
Because it becomes too heavy.
Yeah.
So there are green drake patterns are a great source of amusement for me because everybody has different ones.
Yeah.
I have people that tie and they look like a giant cigarette with wings on them. And I've had everybody has their own secret. But it is a giant mayfly, not as big as the Hexagenia for sure, but it is a big mayfly, and it is a beautiful, beautiful hatch. It's a beautiful hatch. And I have had some amazing days on it. I've had some bad days, and it's a very mysterious hatch.
And when's that hatch in Southern Ontario?
So usually around the first week of June. So if you understand that the closer you get to the Great Lakes, to Lake Ontario or Lake Erie, the hatches are going to be probably a week to 2 weeks earlier than they are as you go further north.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
right? So a great example is I will start looking for the Hendricksons, the Ganaraska, and those rivers pretty close to the first week of May, last week of April, and I'll start looking for them there. As I go further, as I find one, I know, okay, a week later or 2 weeks later, I can go to this stream, which is further north, and fish the Hendricksons again.
Yeah.
Then I can go to this stream, which is even 2
yeah.
hours further north. I can actually get Hendricksons for a month and a half.
You can follow them up the.
Now, why is that important? Well, that's because the fish eat that bug,
Yeah.
and I know the hatch, and I know the stages of the hatch, right? So again, that's a different way of thinking,
Yeah.
right?
So you mentioned north-south. In the south, of course, they hatch earlier. Is there a difference east-west?
There is.
Like with the steelhead, there is. Like the
Yep.
run on the Ganaraska start earlier than
They do.
Than the credit. For the hatches, is it the same?
It is, and the further east you go, the more sterile a lot of those rivers become. But because of the shield, Canadian shield, the rock, it heats up a lot of the water really quickly. That's how come you don't find a lot of great trout streams, classic trout streams, as you get closer to Ottawa, because
Yeah.
those streams heat up really quick because of the rock,
There's like no trout streams in all.
right? It's because those rivers cannot maintain water, it's the right temperature.
And then people dump chlorine into the creeks too, which doesn't really.
Well, there is that. There is all sorts. There is all sorts of that. But I mean,
they stop-
issue is a podcast in itself.
I'll give you a great example. The green drake, the Ephemerella gutulata, when I first started fishing for that hatch, the hatch was very, very robust. And then all of a sudden it started to decline. Why was it declining? It was disappearing. And people were starting to worry. Why is the green drake, the water quality is bad? Well, actually, some of the theories emerging pointed to that. But one of the theories that this entomologist from the ROM started to uncover was it's a burrower. So it burrows into the silt.
Yeah.
The farmers have problems with their corn, so they put pesticides on their corn. Now, this pesticide, the way it gets rid of the pest is it attacks its internal organs and makes them decay, and then the bug dies. Well, that was getting into the ground.
Yeah, it stays
As a
in the
result,
mud.
into the runoff, and it gets into the silt. So the green drakes that they were finding, the insides of the green drake nymphs were being totally destroyed. So it hasn't been proven, but it's one of the theories. So it goes to show you how something like that can
How connected everything is, right?
How
Absolutely.
sensitive to any kind of disruptions.
Well, it's
these
just that's
insects
like,
are.
but that's even like shore development and stuff. Like not even with trout, but like at up at the lake, my parents' cottage up,
Yep.
in the Addingtons there. Cottages being built, you see degradation of like the fishing,
Yeah.
even with just panfish and stuff like that. But I mean, that's because people are like scraping and doing all this
Well,
stuff.
you've,
right?
you've touched on a great thing. Fly fishermen get accused of being elitist.
Yeah.
They're stuck up, they're snobs. And it's not really that way. It's just that because if you're going to be a fly fisherman and you're going to be one that fishes the bugs, you're more attuned to your surroundings.
Right.
Because you need these bugs. If they're gone, what do you do?
You're turning over rocks. You're looking at the water.
Yeah.
Who does that?
yeah.
Right? And when you do that, you observe things in a more, up close way.
Yeah.
So that's the other slam against fly fishing, which really bothers me. That people often accuse them of being intellects, and everybody's.
I'm okay with that.
Hey.
I think you just have to say we are.
Well,
Just
I think
take
again,
it.
it's because if you just go down to a river with a fly rod and you just start casting blindly, you're not going to be successful. You may have the odd.
You'll be
bit of luck.
lucky.
You'll be lucky, but you won't have the kind of success if you research it. The first thing I would do for me, like I say, is I would go to a river that you're going to fish and look very carefully at what's under the rocks and in the water.
Yeah, you see that all the time in the books too,
Oh,
and it's
for sure.
so true, right?
Yeah, this first page in the trout book I bought.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look under a rock.
The other thing too is that mayflies, for example, mayfly hatches. The reason why they're so romantic is they tend to be the kind of bug that the most pristine water has.
Yeah.
Caddisflies, become more important in rivers where there's marginal water quality.
Yeah.
Right. So as you get rivers,
Caddis do?
caddis.
In dirtier water?
So a great example is you take the Credit River, for example.
Mm.
I have noticed in 20 years that the amount of caddis and the importance to the fish has gone up. There was a time where I could not catch hardly any fish on a caddisfly because the fish just didn't see them.
Yeah.
They were more mayfly and stonefly oriented. I have noticed that change. And why is that? That's because the water quality is degrading.
Mm-hmm.
It just is. It's fine.
On the credit?
Well, it is. I mean,
It's adaptation.
well-
you just feed on something else.
Well,
That's
let's see what kind of fish we're catching now. So we don't catch as many brook trout as we once did, right? And that is because brook trout require water. If you can drink that water, brook trout can live in it.
That's what I used to do as a kid back home. I never brought
And they're
any water
native.
bottles. Just bend
Yeah.
down
In the
drink
river.
water.
I mean, they're really not a trout; they're a char, but they are indigenous to the river. So I mean, and
the
they're
Eastern
important.
Canada trout, kind of.
It is.
In a way.
Family
Family-wise.
Now, the brown trout gets slammed a lot, especially in Ontario, and I don't understand why. Everybody wants steelhead, which is fine. You can have steelhead. Every river that runs into Lake Erie and Lake Ontario
Yeah.
and Lake Huron gets steelhead. There's no shortage of steelhead rivers in Ontario.
Yeah.
There's a huge shortage of rivers that are classic trout streams.
Resident trout.
Huge
sticking ahead.
shortage.
Yeah.
And it's funny, you go to central Pennsylvania and you say to them, hey, wouldn't it be nice to get steelhead coming up here? You guys should build fish ladders. They look at you weird. They cross, what?
they're like,
What
why
are you
would you
talking
do that?
Put
about?
that shit in my river.
It's like, what? I love steelhead fishing, but there is no shortage of steelhead rivers in Ontario.
Yeah. Plus, why fabricate an experience, right? Like, you fish what is supposed to be,
Right.
right?
Now, brown trout, to me, first of all, they can tolerate a wider type of water quality, which is not perfect. They do really well in water that's not perfect,
Yeah.
in temperature as well as the quality of the water. So that's a good thing.
Which is not the case with other resident trout.
No, they don't. Secondly, brown trout, they tend to look up, if you will. Like they do respond well to hatches, and they do exhibit selectivity, right? Whereas brook trout maybe not so much. You can get away. They will. I've been skunked by brook trout at times, but brown trout tend to be more aristocratic in that sense. Plus, brown trout are the fish that came, that the guys fishing the limestones, chalk streams of England. Those are the trout that they fish because they were very sporting in that sense. But yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, so you'd say entomology is pretty important to fly fishing then, eh?
Well, it depends. It depends.
I think at the end of it sounds pretty
Well,
damn important.
It's what
conclusion.
you want to do.
Yeah.
It depends what type. Like you said, there's two types of fishermen. There's the one that
Suggestive?
use subjective flies.
Imitative.
Yeah, imitative.
Yeah.
And the imitative. If you want to go imitative, you got to know entomology. You
Yeah.
got to do your homework.
Well, I think so.
Well, fly fishing, like the whole point of fly fishing is that added challenge, right?
It is.
We could go to the river with a worm and catch a fish.
Yeah.
But like we do it with a fly fishing rod for X and Y, but to be more of a competitive type thing, there's more of a challenge there, and so the reward is bigger.
It is. And you know what? I've been with fly fishermen many times, especially ones that haven't necessarily spent that much time at it. And there'll be a hatch on, fish will be splashing everywhere, and they'll cast their fly at that fish, and the fish will splash at their fly, and they say, I missed it.
Yeah.
90% of the
Turned
time,
around.
they didn't miss it. They're actually refusing your fly.
Yeah.
So, if you will, they see the fly coming. Their momentum goes. They go to the fly, and their momentum carries them, and then they put on the brakes, and that splash is actually that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To the point where, in one of the first times I ever noticed that was again fishing central Pennsylvania. I had a fish rising, very steady riser, a nice fish, about 15 inches. I kept casting, and my casting got really good, and I got the fly right to him, and I set the hook, and I got him, and I landed him, and it was foul hooked in the side of his head. Why is that?
Oh yeah.
That's because he refused it, but my cast was really on the money, and I thought, there's a lesson in there for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I remember having no success in Pennsylvania, and I went to one of the local fly shops, and I took my fly box in, and I was almost in tears, and I thought, I can't catch any fish here. And I opened my fly box up, and he said, well, we got no bugs here that look like that.
yeah. Man, you do not want to see my fly box.
He said, if you want to catch fish, he said, you want to sort of look at the bugs a little bit more.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm not saying you have to go in and start counting legs and ribs and things like that, but you wanna have some idea of what's going on.
Would be the two main
Size and color and type. So a hackled pattern versus a low riding pattern like a Comparadun.
Yeah.
Right? Very important. Because I carry both. Because I've had a fish refuse one and take the other.
Really?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and as you get to rivers like the Grand, which is a tailwater, those fish are fished for a lot. They exhibit a high level of selectivity.
Yeah.
And I like that.
Well, what's interesting with that too is as the season goes on, Trico hatches.
Yeah, Trichorhynchides,
August, right? Kind of like towards the fall. I fished those upstate, and that was the most frustrating experience of my life.
No, I bet.
Because I had like size 18, and they were like not even close to like trying to take my fly. It was the worst because I literally had like dozens of brown trout, like big, like 18-inch fish, like just bumping into my legs.
We talk a lot about fly size, but you gotta match the leader as well. See, if you have a size 20 dries, but you're using a 4X, you can match the size, but
it hurts the presentation.
There's a huge knot in front of it, and there's
it's funny. It's funny. Going back to the Trichorhynchides for Mitch. Mm-hmm. So here's an example. Here's my trike box.
Okay.
Here are polywing Trichorhynchides, and then there are hackled ones with hackle wings. Now, why is that? That's because when an insect spinner is flat on the water, and this is Vince Marinero saying this.
Who's this guy? Who's Vince?
Vince Marinero is one of the great angling authors of all time.
Yeah.
The wing lays on the water, and the ribs in the wing make a certain impression in the water. Hackle, tied flat and spent, emulates that better than poly.
Because of the tension on the water, right?
That's right.
Right.
Now, a poly one, if the water was a little broken and, they actually float really well and they'll work well.
Yeah.
But if I'm fishing for really selected fish, and I've had that, where I've had them refuse a poly wing one, but then I put on one with a flat hackle.
Yeah. On calm water.
On calm water.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. So, again, those are the kind of things that you learn as the dunce hat gets smaller on your head. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. We'll see what happens, I guess, this season.
I could just see the three of you guys leaving the water opening day, and you'll look at Yelmo there, and he'll have a small dunce hat.
Yeah.
No, it's big, man.
You'll have a big dunce hat.
I'll have a big dunce hat for sure.
Yeah?
He's swinging mice.
You guys will all be looking at each other and go, that's a nice dunce hat. Yeah, we would always know at the end of the day.
And I'll have the mother hat. and we'll all get gone.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Well, I have different hats, but no fish.
Well, that's fun. Hey, listen, 40 years, and I can still go to be skunked in certain situations. I once bought these plastic wings that had veins in them because I thought, wow, this looks like the real thing to me.
Yeah.
So I tied a coffin fly, which is the spinner for the green drake hatch. Cast it.
Nothing.
Are you kidding me? It's like the fish were there laughing, smoking cigarettes, and looking at me like, look at this guy. It's like, what is that?
It's like an indicator.
Yeah.
It is. Now you can certainly have artificial materials that exhibit properties in the water that look good, but it is more, hackle, various hairs and things like that. They behave they imitate things in the proper way. So, but you can still poly is a antron is hugely important when it comes to caddisflies.
Yeah.
So
we saw it on that.
No, but I would these synthetic material, they're used in the same way as like natural material. But like I'm talking about like you can buy a poly, there's like legs attached to it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah, again, I'll give you a great example. One of the hatches we have here later in the summer, which is very important, called the Isonychia. Mm-hmm. So the Isonychia is a pretty juicy mayfly. Early when I started fishing that, I fished royal wolves. Mm-hmm. Why? I don't know. I had some success with it.
Told you?
Yeah, it could be. But I would catch the odd fish on it. And I thought, this is not making any sense to me. Why? So I went and read Art Flick's book, Streamside Guide. Mm-hmm. And in there, he had a series of flies called variants. So the variants are wingless patterns, right? And I started reading about it, and I thought, well, there's no wing, but the Isonychia has a big wing. Why would it work? Yeah. So I tied one. I went down to my local stream during the Isonychia hatch, and I went out in the afternoon. I lit a cigar. I started walking around. I didn't see any fish rising, but I thought, well, I'm just going to start casting. I came up to the first pool. I cast a variant. It was like someone threw a rock in. Mm. I hooked a fish that was over 2 pounds. Broke me off because I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah. Holy crap. That's crazy.
I thought, what the hell's going on here? Yeah. What? It was a fluke.
Yeah.
I kept walking up the stream that day, and I had one of the best days of my whole life fly fishing with this wingless fly that was tied in the 50s. Huh. Wow. Why is that? The light impression that pattern made on the water looked like the insect. So, and it took me a while to figure it out, but I was sitting there having my cigar, looking at the water, looking at this fly, thinking, why is this working? And then it occurred to me, the pattern that this fly made on the water reflected on the bottom. So when it was floating along, you could see the pattern on the bottom, that the light impression it was making. Now, why is that important? The Isonychia is a sporadic hatch. One here, one there,
really?
One there. Yeah, it's not en masse. Right? So, fish is sitting there on the bottom. It sees this weird impression floating down the stream on the bottom first. And then it's alerted to look up. And then it sees, oh, there it is. Yeah. And then it goes up and it hits it. Right? So, a lot of people will tell you that, wood duck in wings or wings.
CDC?
Yeah, CDC works really well, too. That's a great material. But there are two schools in that world where wingless flies can work as good as flies with wings, depending on the kind of water you're on, right? But that's a secret pattern for me. That's the done variant there.
Oh, okay. I see. No wings. I see what you mean. Oh, yeah.
See how big the hackle is?
Yeah. People skate these too as well, eh?
They do. I have skaters in a box around here. Skaters are really big.
Yeah, it kind of looks like a skater,
but that fly on rivers that have the Isonychia, amazing. And the nice thing about that hatch is because it's sporadic, is you don't have to be there at an exact time. You can go after work, tie one of those on, leisurely walk down the stream, fish likely water, and you will catch fish.
And for those of you at home listening, that's just a full hackle dry fly.
Yeah, it's actually, to be honest with you, you could tie it. It's hackle fiber tail, a stripped quill for the body, and then hackle for the wing. For the hackle for the thorax.
Very, very simple.
It is very simple, and like I say, if you want to know more, I would go and read Art Flick's Streamside Guide.
Yeah. Pretty comprehensive.
Well, here it is here.
Yeah, I took a picture of everything.
So we talked about books a lot. Most of the books are written in the United States, Pennsylvania. You said a lot of influence there. How can we relate as Ontarian fly fishermen to these books? Because I'm sure the ash are different or...
Well,
happening at the same time.
Ephemerella severia is Ephemerella severia. Mm-hmm. The shade may alter.
And how it acts, how it looks, all that stuff is similar.
It's going to behave the same way, right? So that's how you do that. The other thing is there's this phenomena that happens in Ontario. If you look at the Catskills, the Niagara Escarpment, which runs through Ontario all the way up to the tip of Bruce Peninsula. Mm-hmm. Actually, as a spine, runs all the way down into upstate New York. And all the streams that come off the escarpment through all the way to the Catskills have similar hatches.
Then the Catskills.
If all you did was say, okay, I'm going to go and fish all these streams that are near the escarpment all the way up,
Yeah.
chances are they will have very similar bugs.
Okay.
It's a unique thing, but it's something that I've observed.
Maybe in terms of latitudes, maybe it's similar or something like this.
I think
Water
it's that.
temperature,
I also think it's the chemistry of the water
Yeah.
that comes from that.
the geology.
Geology.
Probably same kind of rocks.
It is. I mean, it's not exact, but it's close, right?
Yeah, and you know, like I think there's points in that book that might be specific to that river, but there's still, you know, some kind of thinking you can take away to apply to wherever you're fishing, right?
Well, if you look at the style of flies that they're tying to work,
Yeah.
there's a certain philosophy that's exhibited in there,
Yeah.
right?
Yilma,
Hi.
you've been talking about getting a glass rod.
Yeah. So,
This is the new Echo, right?
yeah.
Glass? Is it
No, it's not. It's Fenwick.
Fenwick
There's
glass.
a whole bunch.
There's a
Yeah,
movement
there's
in glass rods.
Absolutely.
What do you
Why-
think about that?
But what do you want? What do you want to get a glass rod for?
Well, I just want to get better at casting. To be honest, I just want to find my fit. So that's basically it.
What's the sensation of glass rods? Joe?
Well, they're a little slower, not drastically slower, a little slower, a little softer perhaps,
Yeah, softer is a good word.
and those are good qualities to have in a sport where we're supposed to be relaxing.
True.
That's true. Eh?
Which
And
I'm
we
the
forget
complete
about that.
opposite now.
Yeah.
I want something super fast, and I move fast, and everything.
Yeah, and frankly, a great example is if you want to look at fly rod design in general. So let's go back to England, and there is wet fly fishing, which is casting down and across.
Yeah.
And then there is dry fly fishing, which is casting up. So the two styles of casting are different. One is you're fall casting a lot, and you're shooting upstream, and you're picking up line, and you're that tends to favor rods which are faster.
Yeah.
Downstream, down and across, a little slower, not a lot of false casting. Pick it up, throw it out 45 degrees, let it swing through. Those rods tend to be, historically, they tended to be softer and slower.
Yeah.
So a glass rod is kind of in the middle.
Okay.
It kind of does a little bit of both,
Oh wow, there you go.
right?
So it is a diverse rod. It's good for.
It's kind of a compromise, right? You could get a big old bamboo rod that's slow and fish downstream, but if you're going to be casting to rising trout upstream, it's going to be slow and it's not going to work as well.
heavy.
Same if you take a very fast rod and you're casting down and across. Not going to be the most fun thing to sort of pick up and throw out line and swing.
Yeah,
It
that's
doesn't-
true. Yeah, it doesn't feel right.
It doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Glass rods in the middle, and that's probably why they were very popular in the time, because you had fly fishing then, you had dry fly fishing, and you had wet fly fishing, right? In the old days, even further back, you had just wet fly fishing here in North America. So, and then graphite came the other way, right? Graphite was very fast, very efficient, very light, and as a result, how much faster and how much lighter do you want? So you can't feel the rod at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you get bent it. Yeah.
Or it's floating.
Yeah, you gotta be able to load it.
Filled with helium.
Yeah, and it's a great example is too as well. If you understand that, Vince Marinero, for example, everybody thinks that fishing meadow streams with tiny flies, you want to fish a 2-weight rod that's really light. His view was the opposite. He wanted to fish an 8-weight. He wanted to fish a big, heavy rod. Now, why is that? Because on those meadow streams, a lot of times it's windy. And that's when fishing is going to be good, because it's blowing a lot of stuff into the stream. So he wants to be able to cast with authority his fly precisely. And a little light rod would not do that. Now, that's not me. That's Vince Marinero. And that's a good philosophy.
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
think
makes
glass is a great compromise down the middle.
Okay.
If you want to do that.
I think right now is it's nice to keep your options open.
You know what?
How you'd like to fish.
There are days where I like to fish a wet fly and swing a fly in a traditional way for trout.
I love it. It's
It's a very relaxing way.
relaxing,
Yeah. And a glass rod allows you to sort of enjoy that, if that's so you choose.
Yeah.
You could do it with graphite too, but not quite the same.
Okay, so then bamboo then. How does bamboo fit in this equation?
Well, bamboo for me as a material, if you understand that, there's an aesthetic that comes with bamboo. For example, I was told that when you hook a fish with a bamboo rod, everything was more vivid. You could feel the fish shaking its head, and I thought, well, that's bullshit. And then I got my first bamboo rod, and lo and behold, I did notice that difference. Yeah. I have some bamboo rods that are really, really soft, and I remember one particular case where I was fishing on a river in a foam patch, and there was a large brown trout pulling down so many bugs, and I thought, this is it, I'm going to catch him. I went and I cast, nothing. I couldn't catch. He was around my fly, boop, 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 boop.
Yeah.
And so I fiddled with my flies. I finally found a pattern that, for whatever reason, the light impression was right in the foam. I cast it down in there. He took it. Mm-hmm. And he immediately ran out of the foam patch into the main current, into the deep water. And if I would have had a graphite rod, it would have broke my line.
Wow.
But because of the rod I had at that particular case was really soft.
More forgiving.
Mm-hmm. It survived that first blistering run.
Yeah.
And then I was able to sort of recover and gain the fish and land it. It was 21 inches.
Jesus.
Wow, that's a nice resident.
Yeah.
So is that similar to glass then? Same sort of...
It is, except that it tends to be it just tends to be a little heavier.
Okay.
Right? There's a weight you get to it. Now you can buy a hollowed rod if you want, a hollow bamboo rod, but they tend to be a little faster when they're hollow. I like a little weight, a little mass in the rod. Right. And then within bamboo there are hex rods, which are 6-sided.
Okay.
There's pent rods, which are 5-sided.
Yeah.
And then there are quads, which are 4-sided.
Okay, so before we even get into that, when did you start? You build bamboo rods.
Well, what happened was that many years ago, when I was a young, struggling man in advertising, to get a good bamboo rod, it was $1,000 back then.
Yeah.
So I did buy one, but I wanted more.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I can't afford that.
Yeah. So
I had some friends that sort of decided the same. They wanted to get into it, so we started figuring out how we're going to make one. We ordered some bamboo.
Yeah.
We made a lot of mistakes.
Like bamboo shoots.
Bamboo culms, yeah.
Yeah, culms. Okay.
Yeah. And then we started making them.
Wow.
So we and to this day, you know what? I make them for myself. I will occasionally sell them, but more often than not, no. It's not why I build them. Mm-hmm. Right? I build them for myself.
Spend a lot of time doing that, so you want to enjoy them.
Yeah, it's about 40 to 50 hours you put into one. Sometimes less, sometimes more, depends, right?
So the process then begins with, like you said.
Yeah, you get your culm. You split your culm. If you're going to make it dark brown like that, you flame your culm.
Okay. We're looking at a few different rods right now on the table, and one of them is dark wood, one of them is a lighter wood, and so for the dark, you would flame it and burn the culm. And the benefit of that is
aesthetic. It's aesthetic, but some people would say it makes for a crisper rod.
Yeah.
It depends.
Well, because it's solidified.
There's a whole science behind it that I'm not going to get into. But you split the culm.
Yeah.
And what you want to do is you want to get pieces split, and you want them to be in succession, right? Yeah. So that when you glue them back together, it's the same way they came off the culm.
Right.
You have a form which has a V in it, and it's adjustable. So you can make it thicker at one end and thinner at the other end.
So taper it.
It's a 60-degree angle, and you begin to make an angle, triangle. Yeah. And then once you make the triangle and it's tapered to the right particular taper that you want, you glue them together. You dip them in varnish, wrap guides on them, put cork on them, go down to the river and have a good time.
Oh, there you go. And so you said that there's hex, pentagon, and then the quarters, right?
The quad, the 4-sided.
Quad.
So 6-sided, which is the most common.
Yeah.
5-sided, and 6-sided. And you'll see there's a quad, which is the 4-sided. It looks square.
Yeah.
That's 4 pieces.
Yeah.
And the other one is 6 pieces, 6-sided.
What would be the difference between in the actions between?
So the actions in 4-sided, although it can be lighter, it just has it's just fewer pieces, and they will tell you that you have opposing casting planes. So you have 2 pieces. The rod tends to cast more
like in a straight
in a more
line.
straight line.
Okay.
It's not that obvious, but it's there. It's the geometry of it.
Yeah.
Whereas 6-sided tends to be closer to what we know, which is circular rods, right?
Round.
Makes sense.
But bamboo is just a great feeling, and fly fishing is all about aesthetic, and
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I've got one of your rods, and it's the only rod that I use for trout because I've kind of become accustomed to it. When I started using it, it was just like, I just wanted to use this rod for trout. But now it's like I've got the feeling for it, and when I use a graphite rod, it feels weird.
yeah.
It feels way too light and
Because
fast.
it's lighter and faster, yeah.
And it's just, it's like I have a tough time fishing with it because most of the year I'm using that one bamboo rod to fish for trout.
The one that you've broken,
The one that I have mained
that I have to repair.
in the line of my line of
Mitch.
duty on the river. But it was a good river. It was in the Sailor River, upstate New York, and I was looking at a bird and I tripped on a rock and I cracked it.
That's
We,
what's,
I've got to get you to fix it.
My friends and I, who all fish bamboo rods, we have this saying that when you catch a brown trout, the soul of that trout goes into that rod.
Mm-hmm.
So when we see each other and we hold each other's rods, we'll say, "Oh, this feels like it's got a lot of souls in it." And only a bamboo rod can capture the soul of a trout.
Absolutely.
Because it's porous.
Well, that's something that it's a great thing amongst friends.
It's a great say.
No, absolutely, and it feels so true because my rod doesn't have a lot of soles in it, but it's got a lot of wear. So each crack is a different story for me.
Yeah.
That was upstate 6 years ago. Oh, that was that trout that I saw and I freaked out and fell.
It's like
But there's something nice about that.
my graphite rods is 4 years, and I got 3 different tips on it.
Yeah.
The last 3 summers, there's a different tips.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of those things that bamboo rods have emerged. There's suddenly, a lot of people are interested in bamboo rods again, and glass, and I think that's good. I think that there is an aesthetic that's attached to both.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have right here. I have a glass rod from the 70s,
Oh, yeah.
and
What weight is that?
this is a 6 weight.
Oh, nice. 6 weight. Oh, yeah, cool. Right on. Yeah, it does look like it's from the 70s.
It is.
Garcia. Looks kind of like a bait casting rod.
Well, that's the way they used to do them, right? They used to tie them all that way. They used
Do you
to do
fish
all
this
that.
rod?
Yeah, I fish that rod for
God,
sure.
it feels
I got
like
a big
so,
9 weights.
like, breakable.
I have one of
glass
those too.
9
Holy
weights.
Christ.
That,
Nothing wrong with that.
My dad
feels
gave
so-
me when
Oh,
I
yeah, it
moved to
feels
Ontario.
very
It was
friendly.
like,
It's like I just
now
got
you need
that.
something
I'm ready to
big.
break the thing.
That's so fun.
So this rod feels like I could break it with my hand. Just grasping it.
You probably could break it with
Lord,
your
so
hand for
bad.
sure.
It's so fragile feeling. And you can fish that for bass.
I would. That's a trout rod.
I love how you keep the plastic on your cord.
Well,
Keeps them.
because that rod there is worth money now, right?
Yeah, yeah. No,
So,
it's a good idea.
that's cool. Wow. So what kind of reels would you pair with your bamboo rods? I noticed we were looking at some of the like Peerless reels, right?
Yeah. Well, they're
Benchmade.
the best reels I think are the sort of single action English reels like the old Hardys. Those are classic trout
A
reels.
closed one.
Like the
They've got the die cuts in them.
yeah, it's on top of the shelf there. You can see it like a Hardy featherweight.
Yeah, yeah.
To me, that's very classic and very simple. It's a click and pull reel.
Yeah. Which is what a trout reel should be, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Basic.
Line
holder.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. In most cases, unless there are people out there that like more modern technology, and I think that's fine.
Yeah.
But for me, I like simpler, older reels. There's a sound to the click,
Yeah.
The click on my first reel was like out of this world, but it was plastic reel from Walmart. Click, click.
Well, you have
Yeah.
you actually now
You have
have
a good reel.
a raised
Yeah.
you have a raised pillar reel from Bill Ballard.
Bill Allen, yeah.
That's a great reel.
I love that reel. Again, I use the hell out of it too.
It's a handmade bench reel. It's an amazing reel.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's great on bamboo because it's got that. It's a bit heavier.
It is.
So
That's
it
right.
matches the weight of the rod.
Well done. Yes.
Yeah, which is awesome. But we also use a lot of those, like for steelhead
Yeah.
fishing. You use Peerless as well.
Well, I like the older reel, and for they in my opinion they balance a 14-foot rod.
Because they're heavy.
A 16-ounce reel will balance a 15-foot rod really much better,
Yeah.
right?
Steelhead's a whole other conversation for a whole other.
Well, yes, and I'm here. I sit across from a man. I would say there's a handful of people in Ontario that caught a steelhead on a pure dry line. A pure dry line. I'm not talking about any sink tip. I'm not talking about anything.
What up?
I
I'm
don't use sink tip.
I'm talking about a man who cast in a classic way across the stream, swung the fly, and caught a mint chrome fish from one of the Great Lakes streams here in Ontario. That was impressive.
It was dope. That was insane. When I was holding the thing, I remember it was freaking out. Jumped over my shoulder back into the river before we get a picture. But I was, it was like I'd just been baptized. I think I fell in the water and came out a new man.
No, I know you were. I'll be honest
Yeah,
with
you've
you.
pretend shit since
I'll
then.
be honest with you. There, he was actually dazed.
Oh yeah,
He was incoherent.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Couldn't function properly.
I can't believe I made it home. I was driving like amazing.
Yeah,
It was awesome. It was a beautiful fish.
Yeah.
And it was like I wasn't thinking I was good because it was later on in the day. We
It
caught
was late in the day, but it was still right. There was people walking dogs.
Yeah, but we had been out for a few hours.
Yeah,
and
it
we got
was-
a salmon.
Yeah, we got a salmon.
rare.
Yeah, which is rare in
And
that
then-
particular watershed. But your case there, if I would have said to you, Mitch, go down there right now, Cass, you'll get a 12-pound chrome steelhead. You would have said, no way.
Yeah, no, totally.
It's sunny, or it's this, and it's that.
Yeah.
But it was again with steelhead. It's all about taking lines. It's all about knowing if you're going to fish with a swung fly.
Yeah.
It's all about where those fish, the current speed produces the right teasing speed for a fish to hit the fly, and they're the same on the river every year. The fish will be in that place. There'll be fish all over the river.
Yeah.
But the one that hits, they'll be in the same place.
Yeah.
Because of and you should know, you come from Quebec and the great salmon rivers of Quebec.
Which I've never really fished for Atlantic salmon.
Well,
I've
if you
never-
go to fish
I caught one once. It was an accident.
the Gaspé, the river, the pools are all named and they're all the same because historically that is where the fish hit a fly that way.
And they're
it's-
still there today.
Oh, absolutely.
There's you have to not rent it, but you have to go on a.
Yeah. Yeah,
How do you call it?
yeah.
Yeah,
You
guys,
have to go.
like
You have to go. You have to go into a lottery.
Lottery.
Oh,
Lottery.
yeah.
That's the word I was.
Yeah, but you know what? I highly recommend that. We have some of the greatest salmon fishing in the world in Quebec.
Yeah, and you used to fish Gaspé.
Gaspé, I have fished in New Brunswick as well.
Have
I
you been
fished
to the
West
North
River.
Shore?
No, I have not.
No.
I'd like to go to the North Shore.
It's yeah. I've been to the North Shore before for trout,
Yeah.
not for Atlantic salmon.
Yeah.
But
No,
it's a beautiful place to be.
Yeah, I fish the Restigouche. I fish in front of Joseph Poolisher's cottage on the Restigouche.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, right on.
and
Oh, you got your pool there?
no, I don't have a pool there. It was just I was invited. I had a friend who told me, he said, you know what? It's the hard part isn't going. The hard part is getting invited.
Yeah. Because you can't kind of just show
And
up.
he said, if you get invited, you can't ask how much it's going to cost.
Yeah.
So a bill comes at the end of the week, and it's like, holy smokes!
Okay, I guess. Yeah.
My wife's gonna kill me.
Well, there was that. But it is. Atlantic salmon fishing is a completely different world altogether. And I think Quebec is a very lucky place because it has the greatest rivers, I think.
And it's a huge. There's so much water there,
There is.
and they protect it.
Yes, they
And they
do.
care about it too. Like they're not like down here where they're, stalking Atlantics and credit.
Well, that's another word. Can
And
of
lots,
worms.
lots of techniques,
I,
or lots of techniques
Dude.
that you see here. They're banned.
To get back to the trout, because we've gone to steelhead, which we're going to talk about, but let's save that conversation for August when we'll come back and we'll interview about steelhead season.
Yep.
We fished the credit last year, and we were catching Atlantic salmon par, and we thought they were trout, brown trout, smelt or whatever, but they were.
What do you think about Atlantic salmon in the upper credit.
Well,
What's your opinion on
so, you know, first of all, I applauded the idea of trying to do that, of trying to reintroduce fish that was no longer there. But not to the exclusion of the fish that have naturalized and are there. Like I said, Atlantic salmon are hydronomous fish. They're fish that live in the lake and then return to the river to spawn. In Ontario, there is no shortage, as I told you. Every river that runs into
Has an hydronomous fish.
has an hydronomous fish. And for me, I got to fish the credit, for example. I had to fish the credit and the Wilmot before they tried to reintroduce that fish. And it was a very great experience. It was more of a classic situation where you had brook trout and brown trout, and those fish. I got to fish the way that I had always read fly fishing was, stream trout, reacting to hatches. The introduction of Atlantic salmon and par and Atlantic salmon par, yeah, but they'll displace them over time. I mean, one fish is going to go down and one fish is going to go up. The other thing too is the water quality on the credit is degraded to the point where Atlantic salmon just don't do well.
Yeah.
I took my daughter fishing in the same. I took her in July and she caught an Atlantic salmon par and the fish died.
Yeah.
Because the water, it couldn't take the stress of the heat of the water and being caught.
Yeah.
Well, what do they expect these things to grow really big and then be heading up to the forks?
Well, I think
I
think the idea is they have this vision where you're going to have a thriving population of Atlantic salmon like they did 100 years ago or whenever
Was
it
it
was.
native?
Well, there was Atlantic salmon in Lake Ontario, but let's think about this
There's
for a
also
moment.
whales in Ottawa like 500 years ago.
Yeah, well, it's a great
Champlain Sea.
it's a great comment, So the question is that the right thing to do? It's like, well, it is, but not to the exclusion of what's already there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's remove all the brown trout so that we can reintroduce the brook trout and we can reintroduce the Atlantic salmon. Is that the right thing to do?
And why not try to maintain like the great stuff that we have now?
Well, and if you look at it, the brown trout actually does better in the kind of water quality that the credit has right now, which is not pristine.
Right.
Yeah. You can't bend over and drink that water.
No, you can't. So
It's not a bad thing, right?
well, it's not. It's
It's
what
the
it
way it
is.
is. It's just different.
If
It's the way
we
it is different,
choose
yeah.
to live the lives we have, which
Yeah.
is develop the land,
Yeah.
build malls, which is fine.
Yeah.
I go to the mall. Then we have to look at the water quality that we have and say, okay, what is there?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And how can we maintain that?
How can we maintain that, and how can we make that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? It goes back to catch and release.
Yeah.
I think catch and release is great, but I also love to catch a trout and eat it.
Yeah.
If there is no shortage of trout, I will gladly harvest a fish and eat it.
Mm-hmm.
But there are very few rivers in Ontario where that doesn't exist,
Yeah.
right? So, so it's a problem without question in that regard. But I like I say, I lament the credit. It's not the river it once was, and reintroducing Atlantic salmon to me, I don't know necessarily if it's going to be the best thing over a long period of time.
Yeah.
It was nice to go down to the credit at one time, and if you saw a fish rising, you knew it was a brown trout.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it could be anything.
You can be a sucker for that matter. They do rise.
Very well put, my friend. Very well put. As the water quality degrades.
Yeah, suckers come in.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you what, if you go down and some of these streams, you have chub rising, you don't have a lot of brown trout. You don't have a lot of predator fish in that river,
Yeah.
right?
Because they're not scared.
Well, that was the one
That means
thing.
they're brave.
When I was a young guy and I started fly fishing, I would go to a stream. If I caught chub, I knew there wasn't a lot of brown trout there or a lot of trout in the river. There was some, but not a lot. When I went to the credit, I couldn't catch a chub. Why was that? That was because it had a healthy population of predatory sized fish, right? That maintained the population, right?
Yeah.
So, but like I say, good luck to them with the Atlantic salmon. But I think, how long are we going to go?
Yeah.
Are we going to go for another 20 years? Another million fish?
Yeah.
What's the
So
point?
yeah, I agree with that. Yes, it is great, but not in the detriment of other species that are so great.
Well,
to
yeah.
catch,
But like I said, every river at a certain point from, if you go north up to Flesherton, all the rivers run into Lake Ontario. And then on the other side of that, they all run into Lake Huron. Every one of those rivers gets fish running from the lake in them.
Yeah.
Every one of them.
Oh yeah, man. Even
From
like
salmon,
Moira,
brown
all the way up
trout,
to
steelhead.
Belleville gets some steelhead too. Sometimes.
Yes, they
Rare.
all do. I know of ditches.
Oh, yeah.
I know of ditches that go into Lake Ontario, and it gets a run of steelhead.
yeah. yeah.
It does.
Yeah. Well, even look at Wilmot. It's like
Well, Wilmot, I didn't grow up there, but I did fish there quite a bit.
Yeah.
And that's a river that, in my opinion, as well, huge amounts of steelhead and whatever that runs up there. So again, like I say, I like both kinds of fishing, but the credit to me, if you look at Ontario and you look at the history of fly fishing in Ontario, the credit, especially the Forks of the Credit, very important.
Yeah.
Very important. A lot of angling writers. Ernie Schriebert fished the Credit. Vince Marinero fished the Credit. Very important stream. And yet it has all these different points of view. We're going to introduce all sorts of fish to try and, for what?
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't seem.
Maybe we should just keep it to what it works.
Well, you could
What
pull.
works.
You could pull out all the dams and then let happen what happens.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
But for me, it's a sad state of affairs. The Credit is not the river it once was, and it's not about reintroducing fish. It's about going and improving the water quality.
Well,
I think I just saw a blue jay.
you saw a blue jay?
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
I better not see you near a foam patch.
Yeah. If there's one person here, it might be me.
That's
I
gonna be next
won't if
Saturday.
you're here, Joe. If you're there, I won't.
Yeah.
But when you're not there,
Oh no,
I will be in the foam
We'll
patch.
go out together. We'll go together, and
I'm excited for that.
Yeah, we'll go out together. And I think that the big thing for me is recognizing what's happening. I can't tell you how many times I've been on the water and something is happening, and I have no idea what the hell it is. The great success comes when you go, okay, I get this. I know what's happening, and I can react to it.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
No,
I
absolutely.
think as people that lives in the city and then we go out in the weekend, sometimes we're a little too hurry.
Yeah.
You get
Oh,
to
man.
Well,
like
dude,
we
you almost said it
basically-
perfectly when we show up at like 4 a.m. and guys are leaving,
Yeah.
and we're like,
why are they leaving?
we're like suiting up.
most comfortable time of day theory when it comes to
Yeah.
if you think about that.
I don't want to be
Well,
rushing to fish.
If you think about July, it's
Well-
like 25 degrees.
So you're
Mornings
looking
is
for
great.
you're looking if you're the big tip here for you guys is you're looking for low 50s
Yeah.
in the water. So that's going to be when you start to get some good insect activities. Then the next golden number is low 60s. That's when the green drakes. That's when that
Yeah.
right? So where do you find green drakes? Well, there's a lot of streams that have green drake hatches. I'm not going to tell you which of they are.
Yeah.
Off the air, maybe.
You know what? Let's just find it out. Let's just find out. Joe found out.
Joe
himself,
found out, we gotta find out.
So
We'll
we're
give them
gonna
a couple
find out.
stars.
The green drake hatches,
Yeah.
amazing.
So next weekend we're gonna go fishing. We're gonna hit the Forks.
Yes, we
What
need
flies
to.
do we bring? What do I get? I need to go to the fly shop, pick up some flies or tie some. What do I? need?
This time of year, I would probably be fishing, a hare's ear,
Okay.
stoneflies, depending on which stream. If you go to the Grand and you fish stoneflies, you're not going to catch anything.
It's too early, right?
But there's no stoneflies on the Grand. Or
Yeah.
There's no stoneflies, substantial stoneflies. They're small ones,
Sporadically.
but they're not like the golden stones or the brown stones.
Upstate, it's stone, like tons of stone,
Right.
and caddis nips.
Right.
Yeah,
The
same
stick
with
shell.
Quebec where I fish. It's caddis and stoneflies.
And you know what? There are certain fly fishermen who will opening day they'll fish worm patterns.
Yeah.
Chamois worm patterns, which are tied with I can't remember the material, but it looks like a worm
Yeah,
in the
it's
water.
like a
Yeah.
fuzzy kind of
weird.
foamy.
Yeah,
It's weird.
row patterns
Yeah.
work really well.
Even for resident.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Really? So if I tie on a rope
Well,
pattern,
understand this. So one of the species that spawns around opening is the sucker.
That's true.
And,
Yeah.
sucker spawn patterns, gold.
I guess it's easy food. It's drifting down, and
It is.
I
But
agree.
also, if the water's high enough, like I say, there's still a lot of dislodging going on,
Yeah.
right? A lot of that going on. But a lot of people get skunked opening day, like for resident trout.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I guess we'll see what happens next Saturday, but we're gonna.
well,
Yeah,
it's
give it a go.
it's going to be crowded.
Yeah. That's why we're not fishing.
That's why we're not going this weekend.
yeah.
And the water's low, right?
I don't have my glass rod.
Well,
That's the most important.
I haven't looked at the river, but I'm assuming that the water is not as high.
Yeah.
Which again,
Is that a good thing?
it depends. It's like last year because the water was not high. I had great success on blue winged olives, but not on the dry, on the nymph. On a size 16, I caught a fish that was over 20 inches,
Yeah.
which historically I never would have done. Usually you would have fished big stonefly nymphs and drifting muddler minnows on the bottom, which are sculpin patterns, right? Again, that's the other thing. People will strip a sculpin when yet what they should be doing is dead drifting along the bottom.
Yeah.
True, because they're bottom feeders. They go with the current,
Yeah.
heads up, and then go down.
Caught a
this
lot of
way.
fish that way. A lot
Yeah.
of fish.
The sculpin just kind
Yeah.
of.
But if you're asking me what I would do,
what are you doing for a trip? Yeah, what are you gonna do?
well, I'll probably wait till all you guys go home, and I'll go down to the river and
What if we never leave?
Show-
What if we get there at 4 and leave at 9?
human nature. You guys will be toast. You'll be-
Yeah.
They will. I can stay there forever.
We'll be off.
I get
will-
snacks.
You know what I'll probably do? I'll probably show up. I'll turn over some rocks. I'll take a water temperature. Maybe just with my hand, and I'll have a rough idea because I have a rough idea of what roughly 50 degrees is like. Because I've fished a lot of this water for many, many years, I tend to know roughly where to look. But yeah, I mean, like anything, you're always going out early. You're always going looking for dry flies, right? But it's going to be a bit too early probably for it. But if you look in the eddies and you look in the foam patch,
So
you
next
might-
weekend, if I use a streamer next weekend, Joe, are you gonna hate me for it?
No, I
Okay.
think if you know what, if the water is of sufficient level, streamer may work. But if the water is clear and not necessarily, you probably won't have a lot of success.
Be more selective.
Yeah.
There's after a rain, the water comes up and it's dirty. There's going to be a lot of dislodged minnows and
Yeah.
stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, a streamer will work.
Yeah.
I see.
But a minnow that's smart. If the water is clear and you can see the bottom, it's not gonna cross the river to go on the other side.
No. Hey,
it's
listen.
gonna stay in the dark and
When the-
be very wary.
Yeah, when the water's dirty, I have fished crayfish patterns for brown trout.
Wow.
It only makes sense,
Yeah.
right?
So they can see it.
Well, it's just crayfish. The water comes up
Right,
really
they're moving
high.
around.
They get blown downstream.
Yeah. Makes sense.
If you, and like I say, that's the way fish are, right? It's like anything. They're sitting in the current. They're reacting to what's coming down
Yeah.
in the river. So,
Well, what were you saying?
but I tend to I tend to look for hatches.
Yeah.
now,
And
as opposed to just going down to the river and not.
with a blind eye and just hoping for the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put
Well,
an
I think
Adams
that's-
and hope for the best.
And I think that's really like, what we've kind of learned, right? It's the key to success is trying to figure out the streams. What's going on? What are they eating?
I'll do my homework next weekend. I'll bring little bottles
I would.
and I will bring home some of these bugs.
You-
And when we turn rocks, I will do that.
It'll be a huge advantage for you.
I will do that.
And then even if you go to buy flies, take your bugs with you and look
Show,
at it.
show the,
I mostly make my own. I haven't. When I buy flies, they're bass bugs.
Yeah.
But for my trout, I do them myself.
Well, I told you earlier. I told you the Henriksen because of the high level of stillborn.
yeah.
I decided to try tying a fly that was half nymph, half
Mm-hmm.
adult. It's stupid, may not work.
Well, which would I've
I had huge success. I started
Yeah.
catching tons of big fish on it
Yeah.
because, and that to me is what the sport was all about. An observation. You do something and you try it,
And it may
all of a
try,
sudden-
it may
and all
work.
of a sudden, huge,
Yeah.
huge success.
Yeah, the dries I've been tying these days, like I said, with the clean camera hooks, or even not with regular hooks. I do a lot of parachutes,
Yeah.
low profile.
Well, the clean hammer is
That's-
a great example. The clean hammer to me would look more like an emerging insect because the abdomen it would hang in the water
Okay,
because
yeah.
of the curved hook.
Right, yeah.
And you know what? When the Henderson hatches on,
Yeah.
it's a great. The fish is taking it more for an emerger, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's a fly that a lot of people fish the credit use called the usual.
The what?
The usual.
Okay.
And the reason they call it the usual was because someone would say, "What are you fishing?" And they say the usual,
Okay.
because they didn't really want to give away the pattern.
Oh, I see.
It's tied with snowshoe rabbit fur from the paw of a snowshoe rabbit because it's waterproof.
Yeah.
Brown or white?
Well, the material is gray,
Oh, okay.
so it looks like the wing. Look at the thing. The wing on a Hendrickson is very gray.
Yeah.
The Hendrickson done, very gray, very slate gray.
Okay.
But again, going back to what I said earlier, you have to look at all these bugs and say, what's the strike trigger here? What's the thing that's going to make the fish hit it?
Yeah.
And with Hendricksons, it's pink, the color pink, when they first freshly emerge.
Very. Yeah.
An hour later, they're not as pink; they're more tan.
Wow. An hour. Wow. That's amazing.
So many birds. And my ADD is like raging
Yeah,
right now.
Half the time Joe thinks I'm looking at him, but I'm looking at the blue jays in the
I think that's where you get your fly material, eh?
I think it could be.
Yeah.
Jays and squirrels running around. Okay, well, we have an email too, right?
Yeah, we have got a bunch of two emails.
But we have one with a question, right?
Yes.
Let's open that up and talk about what that was. The question was, well, just read back. Here, let's see. Can I see the email? Let's open it up.
Yep.
This was a question about Gatineau, which I fished the Ottawa River on the Gatineau side, but it might be a question that we can answer because it might just be general.
I'm sure you will be able to answer.
Let's see what it has to say.
So here's the email from Brent.
All right, for Brent in Boston, he says that my family and I go on an annual trip to north of Gatineau in the Outaouais region of Quebec.
Outaouais.
Okay,
Come
there
on,
we go.
Mitch. You're from there.
In the beginning of May, been going to the same lodge cabins for 4 generations. The lakes we fish are cold and deep. We target trout exclusively. It's bows up there, brookies, and the occasional split tail. I don't know what a split tail is. But he's looking for some local knowledge, patterns, techniques, the entomology he mentions. He's wondering if we'd have some of that info for him, or if there's a solid fly shop nearby there. And I can answer the fly shop question for you right now. Near there, it was Green Drake in Ottawa, and you've been to that shop as well, and you used to go to that shop.
Yeah.
And it's a good shop. Like, they've got a lot of good materials and stuff there, and some pretty knowledgeable guys. So I would stop by there before you actually head up, because they're going to know the patterns in northern Quebec, because they fished the Gatineau side in Quebec a lot. Those two guys,
I think so. Yeah.
like they're totally local to the region. They fished all
Well,
over.
with lakes, any lake, one of the most important if you're going to fish mayflies or insects, you're going to have a lot of burrowing mayflies.
Chronomid?
Cromnid is very important too as well. But in Ontario, you're going to get mayflies, you're going to get the burrowers. So, they're the ones you've seen them on your lake,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Cromnid is very important too as well. So that tends to be cromnids tend to be more in shallower lakes.
So he's fishing. So he's fishing these lakes for bows. I fished a lake for bows up in Ottawa, and up there we use dragonfly nymphs.
Yeah.
And we just drift them with a full sink line.
Yeah.
And we literally just let the wind take us, and we catch fish after fish because it's just floating.
That's a good
in
one, too, as
60
well.
feet of
Leech.
water.
Leech.
Leech is a
These lakes
great
has
pattern.
a lot of leech.
That's my
So-
go-to on any lake for trout or
Yeah.
for.
Oh, yeah, leech.
Still water.
Always,
Leech
yeah.
always works really well.
And again, going back to what we said, look at the leeches on those lakes. Some of them could be brown.
Yeah, they're
Oh, yeah, totally.
Some could be black.
Yeah.
Some could be small. Some could be big. If you just go with a woolly bugger at this size, it would be nice to spend 5 minutes trying to find out what kind of leeches
Yeah,
are there.
And
absolutely.
so to answer Brent's question, I hadn't fished up in there. I fished the Ottawa. I fished lakes in Westboro or in Westport, and for those I would use dragonfly nymphs. I would go with dragonfly nymphs, brown and black leeches, just marabou leeches,
Excellent.
and I would just completely just drift them with the wind, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe look what else could you do to increase and learn about the entomology on a lake? Could you do the rocks on the shore?
You certainly could do the rocks. You could dig up a bit of the sand around there to see what was there.
Yeah.
But it's more important if you're on the lake and you happen to see, there's a mayfly floating on there's a rise.
Yeah.
That's when you would look and scoop. It could be a chrominid. It could be a mayfly. It's just trying to observe what's happening and reacting to it.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
But
And the weather as well.
But yeah, you know what? You go down into New England and those lakes, and they're trolling streamers with fly rods.
Wow.
right? You know, the
there's
big
like 1 inch, like a landlocked salmon.
landlocked salmon and the big Carrie
Oh, yeah, they're
Stephen
using
flies.
big streamers,
Yeah, the big Carrie Stephen flies. Yeah, and again, it's drifting or it's rowing, and those work too as well.
Yeah. And then out west, it's the Crominus, right?
Yeah, and dragonflies too as well.
In lakes in Quebec, I remember as a kid we used to go to Baptiste Canelson. Was a zec, kind of like for salmon, but it was for trout. And it was fly fishing only lakes. It was amazing. You don't really see that here. And you would go into this little lake. The leech would be complete black, no other color than black. And then you walk a kilometer, you use the other lake, it was brownish red.
See that? That's great.
Yeah.
That's great observation.
A kilometer away from each other, 2 different leech.
I've seen leeches that look like gray with spots on them.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's normal.
Well, a good example
When I
is
digged one.
A good example is on the Grand. When they've opened the dam really high and the water goes up and it's not fishable, and then it starts to drop back down and it's fishable. There's a bloodworm. It looks like a little chromatid nymph that you tie, and it's bright red.
Wow.
And it comes from the lake, and it's only available once they've opened the dam and closed it.
Because it floods it. Pushes
Yeah,
it.
and I've had great success where I show up on the Grand and I fish that because I've seen the water drop, and I go on the upper Grand and I fish that, and I've caught fish that are eating that bug specifically.
Well, so it's all about being responsive to your surroundings, right?
Yeah, I think that's the idea of this podcast.
Yeah.
For sure.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thanks for emailing in. If anyone else wants to email in, the email is it's the SoFlyCrew@gmail.com, right? And then we've also, if you want to follow us on social as well, we've got some Instagram accounts, Facebook accounts. What is it? At the SoFly Crew, and Facebook is just called SoFly.
I just want to make sure something here.
Yeah.
I'm not going to see any of you guys fishing the water that I fish, right?
Yeah, we're going to be
I
on
cannot
those
promise
rivers
that.
fishing foam.
I will not promise
With
that.
spinners now.
I will be right there.
Because I tell you what, when we leave this podcast, I don't know who you are anymore.
Yeah, that's right. And we're fishing foam.
You go to, like I said, you go to Pennsylvania and you say to those guys, "Hey, how you doing? Where do I fish around here?" They all look at you like, I have no idea where to go.
Yeah, in the river.
They lie like you wouldn't believe.
Because they all know exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what to fish. And
Oh, they don't want you. They lie like crazy. They'll tell you, "I would go fish over there."
yeah.
Well, that's the parking lot. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we need more of that in Ontario, too. It's great to be friendly, but let's keep it a secret. It's more fun. It's more fun. But anyways, that wraps up the show. We have a longer show today, which is great because it's full of information. Everybody have a good trout opener. Like I said, don't fish the foam. Catch and release everything that you catch because, we all want to catch these fish.
There's
So let's protect
No
the rivers.
garbage.
Keep the garbage off the rivers.
Yes. Keep it in your bag, in your
Just
pocket.
be a good person, man.
Even cigarette butts. I met an old fly fisherman once. He would smoke his cigarettes and he'd put the butts back into the pack.
There you go.
My dad was a guard on a salmon zec, and he saw a guy throwing a cigarette butt in the water, and he just slowly went to him and said, "Hey, my friend, if I see you do that again, you will go with the butt."
I love that because they don't decay.
And then
Right?
the guy was like,
Yeah,
"Hey,
of
you
course.
work here. You shouldn't be saying that." I'm like,
I
"You
like
will
it.
go with the butch."
Well, just be a good person on the river. Protect the environment.
Yeah.
Don't be a dick. It's easy. Well, thanks
Yeah.
for listening today. Joe, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
We hope to have you on again.
Thanks so much, Joe.
Yeah, thanks for having
We'll
us
do
in
this
your-
again.
Absolutely.
You're home.
Maybe mid-season or closer to Steelhead.
Maybe.
We'll see. We can ask you where all the spots are then.
Joe, the coffee we just drank is one of the best coffee I've never had. It was so good.
Let's have another one. Everybody, thanks for listening,
Yeah, I'll do
and
something.
take care.